Hi, my name is Riley, and today I'm going to be answering a few common questions about heritage speakers, heritage bilinguals, what we can do as a community and as a state to prevent the attrition of heritage speakers in their heritage language, and a few different theories involved in heritage bilingualism. To start off, I have this chart here to demonstrate which category heritage bilinguals fall under. They are simultaneous bilinguals, and this typically what happens is heritage speakers. Hi, my name is Riley, and today I'm going to be answering a few common questions about heritage bilingualism, heritage speakers, and a few theories involved in heritage bilingualism. To start, here's a chart that explains the category in which heritage bilinguals fall under. Heritage bilinguals are simultaneous bilinguals, and they are categorized as children of immigrant families or people who live in a monolingual community but learned their L1 in a bilingual area. The phonetic skills of heritage speakers are usually similar to monolinguals, but they have morphosyntactic errors in the L1, and they are more dominant in the L2, especially after environmental factors such as moving countries where their L1 is not the dominant language and they learn in L2 and experience attrition in the L1. One of the first theories regarding heritage bilingualism is the incomplete acquisition model. According to this model, heritage bilinguals may exhibit incomplete acquisition of their heritage language due to reduced exposure or opportunities to practice this language. Incomplete acquisition can lead to incomplete grammar, which is also something that can lead to attrition in the L1. Something important to remember about the incomplete acquisition hypothesis is that input is responsible for attrition. It contradicts the critical period hypothesis, which I'm about to explain, and also heritage speakers may experience language loss due to lack of input. The critical period hypothesis states that there's a biological constraint to acquire languages in a native-like way. The critical period refers to the time period before puberty, where it is seen as the critical period and when you are most likely to be able to acquire the syntax morphologically and phonologically in a native-like way in your L2. The incomplete acquisition hypothesis can be seen as a contrast to this because it states that even a language within the critical period syntax is not for sure to be monolingual-like or native-like. This could be due to environmental factors, as opposed to the biological, which would be the critical period. The environmental factors being the input and output that you're receiving, the method of which you're learning this language. It's not linear, but it is not always relied on biological factors such as the critical period. On the terms of input and output, input is referring to the listening and the comprehension that you are doing in that language, very critical to proficiency, so is output is critical to proficiency, referring to the writing and speaking that you produce in that language. The final hypothesis is activation threshold hypothesis. This is the explanation of how bilinguals manage their two languages and are able to switch between their L1 and their L2 in real-time conversation. It is composed of lexical representation, which includes words, phrases, and grammatical structures that are stored in the memory. Activation level and threshold. The level refers to the likelihood that a specific lexical concept is going to be used, and this occurs when the information passes through the activation threshold. The activation threshold is the minimum amount of activation that a lexical item needs to be used. Along with this, code switching occurs when bilinguals switch between their two languages within the same conversation. According to the activation threshold hypothesis, code switching occurs when lexical content from one language surpasses their activation thresholds while those from another language are below the thresholds. Lastly, the explanation of attrition and the risks that it poses to heritage bilinguals. Attrition is defined as the gradual loss of proficiency or fluency in your L1 or your L2. Occurring in the L1 would be the example of a heritage Spanish speaker, for example, moving to the United States where the first language is English and being enrolled in schools and different extracurriculars, social life, and Spanish not being spoken at home anymore, and also not being spoken in the schools, slowly losing the proficiency of Spanish and relying on the L2, which is now English. A way that L2 learners experience attrition is, on the other hand, a Spanish speaker or an English speaker learning Spanish and slowly stopping the input and the output, and therefore losing whatever proficiency they had in their L2, in this case being Spanish. Lastly, the importance of what we as a community and as a state should implement to prevent attrition for heritage bilinguals. The sad fact of heritage bilinguals is a common issue, especially for young children or adolescents, is the feeling of needing to fit in and the emotional aspect that contributes to attrition. When everyone around you is speaking a different language than you are, and you don't have a specific class or a specific group of people that are speaking your language that you also know, it is more desirable to just not speak it, unfortunately. Some things as a state that would be helpful to do is put funding into separation of ESOL classes and Spanish classes, because on the other hand, it is important to not lose attrition in the L2. Spanish classes providing the needs to L2 speakers of on the track that they're learning Spanish in a Spanish class, and then Spanish provided to the heritage speakers of their L1 in an ESOL class where they are exposed to their L1 and also their L2. The constant input and output of in both the L1 and the L2 are important regardless of which one is your L1 or L2, and it is vital to maintaining both languages and not experiencing attrition. On the other hand, for heritage speakers, it's important that in the home life and in social life that the L1 is contributed into that with reading, music, cultural events, movies, anything along those lines to keep the input and the output of the L1 in their life. Thank you. Hi, I'm Riley. I was hoping I could interview today on heritage bilingualism.
Yeah, I'm Mac. Awesome.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, have you ever learned a second language before?
I've tried, but it's been a really long time. I don't think I've done it or studied since high school.
Do you know about the risks of attrition in this second language because you don't have the necessary output and input into this second language?
No, I don't. Do you think you could tell me more about that?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
So, when's the last time you practiced Spanish?
Probably high school, which has been almost 6 years ago.
And do you want to keep learning Spanish?
I would love to keep learning Spanish.
That's awesome. You need to make sure you keep up the good practice and the exposure to all the Spanish you can so you can keep Spanish as your second language and not fall victim to attrition.
Okay, I'll do that and not fall victim to attrition.
Thanks. Hi, is it okay if I interview you for a project?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So, do you speak any language other than English?
I do. I speak English and Gujarati.
Awesome. So, do you still speak Gujarati?
I do.
And where did you learn Gujarati?
I learned it when I was growing up. My parents and grandparents would speak it to me in the home, and all of my family knows Gujarati as well.
So, do you still speak Gujarati?
I do.
Okay. And have you ever taken classes on it, or did you learn it specifically in the home?
I have never taken any classes. I only learned specifically in the home. Even the grammar and way that you pronounce things are all through the home.
Awesome. So do you still practice with Gujarati and have exposure to that, or has it been a while?
I do. Only my grandparents really speak Gujarati with me. It has gotten a little less since I've been away from home, but I do speak to them on the phone, and whenever I go visit, I'll speak to them in Gujarati as well.
That's awesome. So something you may not know about is attrition, and attrition would be if you didn't have any more input or output to the language and you began to lose your fluency in Gujarati. But it's really awesome that you still speak Gujarati with relatives and you're not forgetting it. So Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.